I've talked about before that we have this wide range of topics, and we have a huge list of them that Eric and I have that we have access to. And usually, every now and then, I'll see something named somewhere, and I'll go, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll do a really quick Google search just to see how many hits you get. And if there's enough information there, I add it to the list. And okay, we can come back to that later.
Sounds plausible.
I heard somewhere, probably a Reddit post, a mention of the West Virginia Vegetable Man. I did a Google search, saw plenty of links, and I thought, now here's a story that we can flesh out. I've never heard of the Vegetable Man.
There's got to be a lot to this.
Well, Eric and I literally just got done having a conversation about, he really thought I was pulling his leg when I said this was a full topic. And to be fair, most of what I found was just the same story over and over and over and over. I did finally find some things that were associated. And so you have this vegetable vampire from West Virginia that was seen by a hunter.
Which is a much better name, by the way. Than
Yeah, if they'd have called it that, the Vegetable Vampire.
The Vegetable Vampire.
But tonight we're going to talk about the Vegetable Man of West Virginia.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
I'm sorry, Eric. I didn't know how much work this was going to be.
I was cussing you, Bill. I literally was cussing you.
To be honest, the longer we go on this podcast journey together, the more we're going to run into these stories that like, oh, there's not a whole lot there.
But it gets to be like, challenge accepted.
Well, in this case, I think that's what you did because, like I said, I was totally waiting for you to text me and go, we can't do the Vegetable Man. There's nothing here.
There's nothing here.
And I was able to fill in. I found a lot more than I thought I would, but it took me 2 days worth of looking and poking and prodding. Like I said, I didn't have heart. I kept finding the same story over and over. And then this morning before we recorded, I finally hit upon like, oh, here's some more information. I can do this and I can do that. I literally like almost got inspired. I was typing away like, this is this. And then I was like, well, if Eric doesn't find anything, we
Bill,
can just
I'm going to lean hard on you, but I am going to take the appearance. I'm going to give the appearance. I'm going to start off with that because I know you've got a lot more information. The Vegetable Man, or affectionately called the Veggie Man, was said to be a very tall, arguably like 7 foot, thin, with kind of a semi-human shape. It appeared to be particularly plant-based. I would envision, if you will, an Ethiopian version of the Swamp Thing.
With human-like facial features, pointed ears, long arms, long thin fingers.
I did find a couple accounts that it had wings. I didn't come across that very often.
No, I didn't see that at all.
But I did find one that said wings, long fingertips and arms that resembled that of like reeds out of a pond or brambles. And then the coolest part, at the end of the fingertips were suction cups
with thorns in them.
With thorns. A lot of people said needles, but I think since we're going to call it the Vegetable Man or Veggie Man, thorns make more sense.
I mean, if you're going to describe a plant-like creature, thorns definitely seems more accurate.
And I love what you did there with the vampire aspect. I mean,
that was a better name.
Much better name. But,
well, and as we get through the story, you'll understand why.
So that's the appearance I'm going to roll out for Bill's story.
And this is basically all based on a single sighting by a single person that was said to have occurred in Marion County near Grantown, just north of Fairmont, West Virginia. Now, this story, was documented in an issue of Gray Barker's newsletter from March 1976. Who's Gray Barker, you may ask?
He's quite the character.
Gray Barker was a character, apparently, and Eric may have gone into a little more detail on him. He was a Braxton County native and Clarksburg resident and a known hoaxer who was active from the 50s into the 80s.
I want that title.
Known hoaxer.
Just give out the business cards. Known hoaxer.
Off topic. I was looking at something on Facebook the other day, and I saw a picture of a guy and his name, and then under his name was his title, and it was Garlic Bread Expert.
Garlic Bread Expert.
I want that job.
I want that job. I love garlic bread.
Yes.
Who doesn't?
But Gray, he published this newsletter which specialized in UFO and paranormal events. And usually these stories were accompanied by illustrations. Most of them were supposed to be first-hand accounts of the mysterious and the unexplained. Now, of course, with Gray being a known hoaxer, who knows?
Now, I wonder, in his defense, was he no hoaxer at that time, or did that
Was
kind
it
of
because
come
of the
out
things he was
later
looking
on?
into? Oh, you mean was he a hoax? Did they know he was a hoaxer,
Yes.
or did that come out? I don't know.
I mean, maybe at the time he was considered, a legit investigator,
Well,
story writer.
I mean, he was known for his investigations into the Flatwoods Monster and the Mothman, and apparently
They were all neighbors.
Well,
I mean,
apparently he introduced the idea of the Men in Black. He was the guy who first started talking about them. So, I think we'd all argue that the Men in Black pretty prevalent in the UFO mythology.
yeah.
McGray Barker published this newsletter, and there is a collection of his research and correspondences that is kept in the Clarksburg Harrison Public Library. And amongst this extensive collection of Barker's writings, there is an issue of his newsletter published in March of 1976 that has the first-hand account from a Jennings H. Frederick, which I kind of go back and forth between Jennings and Frederick, but Jennings is his name, Jennings H. Frederick, in 1968, where one day in the woods he encountered the Vegetable Man. Barker described Jennings as an amateur rocket expert turned UFO investigator, so he was also interested in these things. And in the newsletter, Jennings described his intense encounter with the Vegetable Man. And I do like this story. It's very interesting.
It is. It is a good story.
A beautiful day in mid-July 1968. Now, Jennings is 19 at the time, and he was out in the woods hunting woodchucks.
I heard with a bow.
With a bow, yeah. And I didn't know that was a thing that people did.
That would be extremely difficult.
Well, woodchuck, if you're not knowing what we're talking about, you're talking about when they get up on their hind legs, they're what, like 2 foot, 3 foot?
I mean, but
But
that's
they're
kind of
not
like,
real
like
big.
rabbit hunting with a bow. I
Yeah.
mean, kind of, that's some skill.
So he's out bow hunting woodchucks in the woods near his home in Fairmount, West Virginia. Now, the story goes, he hadn't had much luck that day, and as he's getting towards the end of the day and it's starting to get, sun's going down, starting to get towards evening, he starts making his way out of the woods. Now, he's still on high alert, bow at the ready, just in case he stumbles upon another woodchuck before he gets out of the woods.
And he's asking himself, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Now, I will counter with, a woodchuck would chuck all the wood if a woodchuck could chuck wood.
Nicely played. Nicely played.
I don't know where I heard that, but I've heard the riddle, and it's like, oh no, I've got an answer.
I got an answer for that.
As Jennings is making his way out of the woods, he begins to hear a sort of high-pitched, jabbering voice, which he described as sounding like a record player turned up way too fast. If you had record player and you're familiar with how that sounds, I mean, just any sped-up audio.
Not the whirling, but the audio, the voice distortion.
Now, obviously, this draws your attention, and Jennings, like anybody, I think, decides he needs to investigate. So he's trying to figure out where this noise is coming from, and he comes face to face with a horror that was described as follows in
Bill, we're not having that type of a podcast.
Horror.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Maybe I was speaking too fast, but I should.
Okay.
It was described in Brad Steger's Alien Meetings as follows, quote, "Suddenly, there it was, a being with semi-human facial features, long ears, and yellow slanted eyes. Its arms were no bigger around than a quarter. Its body resembled the stalk of a plant in shape and color, for it was slender and green." Now that sounds like some Tolkien level.
Yeah.
For it was slender and green.
For it was slender.
Now Jennings said he saw this green creature. It was green like a plant, skeletal in appearance. The creature's arms ended in 3-fingered hands. The fingers themselves were 7 inches long and tipped with suction cups with needle-like tips.
Now, he mentioned the arms were no bigger around than a quarter. So,
Yeah.
I mean, very stick-like, like a walking stick kind of insect.
And the creature reminded Jennings of the stalk of some huge and ungainly plant. He would later say that the being did look weakened and sickly. It felt vulnerable to him. Now, while he was watching this thing and trying to figure out what was going on, what he was seeing, he said he could suddenly understand the noises that he had been hearing. And according to Barker's newsletter, this is what it said.
Ooh, can I say it? You need not fear me. I wish to communicate. I come as a friend. We know of you all. I come in peace. I wish medical assistance. I need your help.
That sounds like a creature in distress.
I tried.
And with that, the creature lunged at Jennings. That's a weird message to give before you jump a dude.
I mean you peace. Now I'm going to jump you in the woods.
Before Jennings knew what was actually happening, it felt like his arm was caught in a thorn bush. What it was the creature had grabbed him and it wrapped its surprisingly strong arms around him And as Jennings tried to break free, he couldn't. I mean, this creature was deceptively strong. And it wrapped its fingers around his arm, and the thorns on the fingers pierced into his skin.
Thus the vampire aspect.
Quote, he heard a suction sound, and new blood was being drawn, said the newsletter.
Eh.
Jennings said he could see his blood flowing up the creature's arm, these red streaks, and it flowed up the arm and through the body until it got to the creature's eyes.
I don't care who you are. That's a good story.
That's a good story.
That's good stuff.
When the red got to the creature's eyes, the yellow of the eye and the red of the blood started to swirl together. And Jennings found himself entranced by the swirling colors, saying the eyes turned from yellow to orange to red as they began to spin, much like the old school hypnosis wheel you see. Hypnotized, Jennings was distracted from the pain in his arm, but though he could not feel the pain, he said he could still feel his blood being drained from his body. Now, Jennings believed this transfusion lasted no more than maybe 2 minutes, and once the creature had had its fill of Jennings' blood, it released him, and then fled over a nearby hill, according to Jennings, quote, covering 25 feet or more in each leap, like a modern spring-heeled jack.
25 feet. This thing is, covering some ground.
Yeah, it can book it.
Now that's, to me, like Dungeons and Dragons. Again, I throw a lot of Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but that's a creature that you would come across in Dungeons and Dragons.
Maybe not the right time to mention this, but I was talking to my son one day. Apparently, we fall back on the Dungeons and Dragons thing a lot.
He brings us up.
There was some criticism about how often we mention that.
Well, there it is again. Not to let you down.
You're talking about two people who have played Dungeons and
We're
Dragons for a
bunch
better
of
part of their
nerds.
life. So
Yeah.
now, as soon as the creature was out of sight, Jennings began that pain in his arm came back to him. He could feel it again, and he looked down and he could see he had these small puncture wounds left behind to attest to what had happened. And of course, panic set in. Jennings is booking it. He's got to get out of the woods now. So he takes off running. Now, as he's running, he says he could hear a deep humming coming from the other side of the hill that he thought might have been the creature's ship taking off. Jennings believed he had encountered some sort of alien.
Now, see, to me, that was a little odd. I think it's cool, but a stick-like figure, that is not at all like most alien-esque descriptions. Yeah. And to immediately think of a UFO, a spaceship, to me, I thought that was interesting.
And for those of you wondering how much there is to the story, that's it.
That's pretty much it. Now, I will say, if you do some research on this, how do I say this politely? There's a large following of people that believe that maybe Jennings didn't have a lot of luck hunting, and he may have done some mushrooms in the forest.
Okay.
And then he had himself like this vision quest. It's a real thing. Just saying.
Jennings feared being ridiculed for this story. I wonder why. And so he vowed to never tell anyone about his encounter. When he got home, he told his family the wounds on his arm had come from him running into a briar patch. However...
Maybe that was the truth.
Well, yeah. However, he did, for some reason, eventually decide to share his story with Gray Barker. Now, no one else ever reported seeing the Vegetable Man. And while this story does seem absurd and feels like it's made up, some argue, why would Jennings make up such an elaborate and ridiculous story?
There's a lot of weird details and explicit details in that.
And additionally, why would he wait so long to tell? I think he didn't reveal it until almost 10 years later.
And again, if you're going to go with the UFO, why not just kind of play along the typical alien description, not this slender stick man?
In addition, those people who have talked to Jennings really feel that he's being sincere when he told the story. So the people who have talked to him about it, they believe he believes it. Now, that is it for the Vegetable Man encounter that Jennings documents. However, Jennings and his family do have some other interesting stories. And so in the course of investigating the Vegetable Man, I stumbled upon these stories, and I felt, we'll just roll this all in together. Jennings would later go on to serve in the United States Air Force, became a U.S. Air Force veteran. So again, somebody who, seems
got
like
some credentials,
would have some integrity. I think we lend a lot of, credulity to military. I mean, he was a military man, and those people are usually pretty serious. After his discharge, he did claim to have an encounter with the Men in Black. And we know the Men in Black are usually associated with the UFO phenomenon.
Great movie series, by the way.
Between 1 and 4 in the morning, he was awoken suddenly by a red flashing light. Now, like any good country boy, first things he does is he grabs his revolver out from under his pillow.
From under his pillow?
And he walks out into the living room to see what's going on. In the floor, he sees a small gas canister, like a tear gas grenade or something. And as he's looking around, a hand comes out of the darkness, just shoots out, grabs him, and puts a needle in his arm. It's then that he sees 3 men in black turtlenecks, slacks, and ski masks in his living room. One leans in closely and tells him, "The dogs have been darted, and everyone is gassed." They then put a gas mask on his face and began to interrogate him about UFOs. They wanted to know what he thought they were, and what he thought of the future of UFOs.
Interesting questions.
And that's sort of his whole encounter there. Now, a story that I feel, one, may be the inspiration for Jennings' story, or two, maybe a previous encounter with Vegetable Man, comes from his mother, Iva. She claimed to have witnessed a strange creature that she described as devil-like that came from a flying saucer that landed in a field near her home when she was younger. She said she was washing dishes one morning when she saw a small black or dark green creature from her kitchen window. Now, at first she mistook it as a child. She thought there was a kid playing in the yard, didn't know what to think. But as she started watching, she began to notice more details. It had pointed ears. It had a tail. It wore no clothes that she could see. And she said that it was shoveling grass and dirt into a bag that it had for some reason.
Kind of sounds imp-like.
Now, just beyond the creature was a 5-foot-tall, 10-foot-wide, dome-shaped craft with an extended elevator. Now, the creature seemed to be attached to this craft by some sort of cable. The craft itself was silver and cream in color and had a row of windows and seemed to be rotating counterclockwise while producing a humming noise. Now, she ran from the window in terror, only to return a few minutes later, maybe to confirm what she thought she saw. When she came back, she saw the devil taking off in the saucer, which lifted gently off the ground while humming louder than it had before. Now, she told her son about what she'd seen when he came home from school, and Jennings, I think like anybody doing their due diligence, he went out and he found depressions in the ground where the UFO would have been, according to his mom, and found clawed tracks on the ground where his mother said the creature was.
Digging or whatever.
Now, this was enough to convince Jennings that his mother had been telling the truth.
Now, you said she saw this demon-like creature driving off or
it got in the UFO.
Steering the UFO? Or
took
what?
off.
See, when you were telling the story, I was thinking the alien probably had a pet dog or cat that they just needed to take out on a leash and take a poop in the backyard.
Well, again,
something.
she described it as black or possibly dark green in color, which leads me to say maybe. And then, pointed ears and stuff like that. So very similar.
Yeah.
Now, she said it was devil-like. She didn't get into like bodily proportions or anything, so we don't know that.
Well, there is a new version of a Vegetable Man. I don't know if you know about this. There's a new author. His name's Michael Strayer, and he took this horrific story. And again, you go back to the vampire vegetable, as Bill and I are going to dub it. It's a pretty creepy story. So what does he do with it? Kind of does like what Bill and I does a lot of times. He turns it into a children's book. It's called Curious Creatures, The Vegetable Man, who walks around West Virginia in search of help in order to be able to return home. Kind of an E.T. story, but with a vegetable vampire style character. But he turns this into a children's book. They interview him. He actually is one of a 3-part podcast. They have their own podcast, kind of talk about the weird, creepy stuff. But, he looks back and he's being interviewed. And he's like, looking back, I probably didn't choose the best topic for a children's book. But he goes, that was a story. He grew up in the area I was very familiar with. And he goes, a lot of times, writers go back to what's familiar.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting and worth mentioning. Now, I wanted to take it, again, I'm the historian sleuth, since that's kind of a fallen title on me. So I thought, well, I've got the story of the Vegetable Man. It took place 1968. We got the guy's name, Jennings Frederick. Sounded like, maybe he would have been a younger man at the time of the encounter. I think you even mentioned 19.
19.
So hadn't joined the military yet, still out of high school, but, somewhere in that time frame in between. So in theory, I should be able to find something on him. He might even still be alive.
Well, I saw where other people had done some similar research, I think, so.
Well, sadly, it appears he most likely passed away in 2012 at the age of 62, actually quite young. Online, I found a newspaper obituary in the West Virginia Times. Now, based on my research, I think this is most likely the same Jennings Frederick, whose name at least we used or was used in this strange alien cryptid story. You had mentioned a H abbreviation for a middle name. Well, this is Jennings Harold Skip. That's what he went by. Frederick. Says age 62 of Fairmont, passed away from his life on Tuesday, April 10th, 2012. He was born May 28th, 1949 in Fairmont, which again, this is right there in that same area.
Yep.
the son of the late Jennings Charles and Iva Jean Toothman Frederick.
I would think that the details are pretty close that has to be the guy.
That has to be
What
him.
are the? I mean, to be fair, Jennings Frederick was kind of an odd name anyway, and
Yes.
then Iva is another unusual name.
Yep, and got the same middle initial H there. He was a Methodist by faith, later served in the U.S. Army. Now, you said Air Force.
Well, it was
But-
Army Air Force in the early days, if you remember.
Oh,
so-
okay. Well,
Yeah.
the obit said United States Army. Jennings was a 1967 graduate of Riverside High School, so
68, and he was
68,
19. so-
19.
yeah.
It's playing along. He attended Fairmount State College. From a very young age, he had an artistic talent of being able to draw anything that he saw. Skip, as he was well known for, was an avid collector of natural artifacts. He loved art and science with a passion. He collected fossils, arrowheads, and many other geological treasures. There's more on the obit about the children and stuff, but I think that was the best match of what I could find. Not saying that they would have put that in the obituary.
We're like 165 episodes in, and I have never once thought about looking up the names of the people we're talking about to actually do research. That's actually really good. Like,
Well, I was trying to find some more merit for the episode in all fairness. So, but I thought he should maybe even still be alive. But apparently, he was taken at the age of 62. But there was no mention, which again doesn't prove or disprove. I'm not sure an obituary would say, this is the man that said he encountered the vegetable man.
such an obscure little story. It's not like he was at Roswell or something like that.
Yeah.
If I was at Roswell, I'd want that in my obituary. But if I, saw some weird plant creature and I was the only guy on the planet that ever saw it, maybe I don't want that documented.
And especially if he was reluctant, at least at first, to, share the story. Maybe the family kind of feels that way too. But
Well, I have one other possible vegetable man story.
oh, do tell.
Now, I didn't find this, but I found this referenced on another website. In a book called Monsters and Ghosts of West Virginia by Aaron Turner and Isaac McKinnon. Now, this particular anecdote was based on one of the author's own experiences. It doesn't say which author in the book or on the website that I was looking at. I believe in the actual book, it didn't say which author. It just said the author's experience. But they encountered this creature. Now, this veggie man was sighted in the author's own garden. It was a
Very
warm day.
appropriate.
Yeah. It's a warm day, and the author was out enjoying their garden when they noticed that there were some weeds that needed pulling. That's what you do when you're out in the garden.
Yep.
So they bent down to pull out the invasive plant, and as they pulled out the weeds, root and all, they saw something moving between the stalks of the sunflowers in their garden.
It's like Harry Potter pulling out the mandrake.
Yeah. Well, kinda. Actually, it's weird. That same article went into talking about mandrakes and stuff, but I didn't go that way. Now, as they watched this garden invader, it appeared that as if some strange plant had taken root between the rows of the sunflowers. Now, the remarkable thing was the size of this plant. It was almost as tall as the sunflowers, which themselves were between 6 and 10 feet tall. So
Oh, wow.
the plant was easily 7 feet tall. And they described the stalk of it as being so thick that you couldn't wrap your hands around it and have them touch on the other side.
Almost like a small tree.
Now, trying to get a better look at this strange garden invader, the author slowly started walking towards it when all of a sudden there was a commotion in the sunflowers. It caused them to shake, like you'd imagine, or like the weeds in Jurassic Park, whatever. The plant itself began to move, and what they thought was just a stalk separated into a pair of legs. Now, this plant creature, realizing that its camouflage had failed, it began to make its way through the field of sunflowers, taking large strides.
I am Groot.
With long arms swinging at his side, which they described as looking very much like Patty from the Patterson-Gimlin film. So that kind of long swinging arms. And you want to go back a few episodes, we talk about that. Now, they said the creature moved with incredible speed,
There we go again.
and it raced through the sunflowers until it arrived at the edge of the woods on the other side of the garden. Now, the author watched it as it made its way to the trees and then stopped and turned. It was there they noticed that the figure had large, yellow gold eyes. It seemed to be
similarities.
seemed to be staring at them. Then it stepped into the tree line and disappeared into the forest. So again, it moved very quickly. It had those yellow eyes, very plant-like in appearance.
What year was this?
It didn't say.
Didn't say.
It didn't say. And it said this was based on the author's own encounter, but it was still West Virginia. So, so there, another potential veggie man encounter. All right, Eric, I think it's time for headlines.
Time for headlines. Well, I came across on Paranormal West Virginia online the first ever Veggie Man Day coming to Fairmount. Article was written by Sam Gorski. This was posted February 21st of 2024. Fairmount, West Virginia posts, hungry for another cryptid festival? An unfamiliar face is looking to break into the mainstream to join West Virginia's growing monster mashup, The Vegetable Man. Coming July 13th, which is my birthday, Veggie Man Day will be held at the Frank and Jane Gaber, West Virginia Folklife Center in Fairmount.
That's a long name.
That's a long name. That's going to run out of room on a business card. The event will be free for all ages and will run from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, according to the event description, it will include artist vendors, authors, live music, food trucks, free veggie snacks, exclusive Veggie Man Day merchandise, and more. Hey, want to eat a carrot? It might come to life. Veggie Man, or Vegetable Man, was first described, as we had talked about, in the issue of Gray Barker's newsletter from March 1976. Goes on to give the same description that we have given. The event was actually announced last Wednesday as being part of an organized event by the West Virginia-based Moth Boys Paranormal Podcast and Conjure Dust Designs, an Ohio artist known for their cryptid and monster artwork. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that is the same podcast that wrote the children's book that I had mentioned.
Well, my headline is from WCHSTV.com by Brad Rice and Brandon Stover from February 21st, 2024. Now, I knew I probably wasn't going to find any headlines about the Vegetable Man, so again, I did just strange West Virginia. The title is Wild Appalachia, the Roar of Peters Mountain. Now, Peters Mountain is known for its beauty and as a migration route for birds of prey. The 25-mile range, which separates West Virginia and Virginia, is also known for something else to locals. Its unique roar. David Sybray, publisher of West Virginia Explorer magazine, has researched this unusual phenomenon. Quote, I've never heard it, but I'm told it sounds like the roar of 1,000 lions.
Wow.
Or it sounds like steam engines or a tornado. And those who have heard it speak of it in this very reverent way, he said. They've been talking about it since the settlement, and I'm sure the Native Americans who traveled here must have heard it. Now, it's heard most often down below on the western side of the mountain. Sybray continues, quote, you can hear it all through the valley, beyond these peaks and all these fields here. The people who live in those areas know this sound. Now, a few believe that this roar is supernatural, which you would automatically, I think, go to that. I mean, why else would a mountain roar?
Yeah.
But there is a more likely cause. Sybray continues, as near as I can tell, it happens almost year-round whenever there is some sort of weather event happening or on its way. It might be a day before the storms appear that you'll hear this roar. Now, he seems to be describing what's called a low-level jet. That is a fast ribbon of wind in the lower atmosphere that pushes moisture and warmth northward ahead of storm fronts. Sort of follows the flow of the weather there. You know, like in Missouri here where we're at, most storms follow I-44.
Right.
Kind of a northeasterly direction. Well, that's the direction their storms go. There's something again about the Roxon phenomenon, be it geological or meteorological, he says, that attract people's interest. There's not a day goes by that someone doesn't contact me through West Virginia Explorer looking for more information. Now, although the wind may be causing this roar, there's something that's a little harder to explain. Sybray has never found any evidence of this happening anywhere else in the world. I'm not aware of that. I've been looking out for that kind of information, and certainly somewhere there's a meteorologist or a professor who has studied this kind of phenomena, but I've never heard of it happening anywhere else, which is why so many people talk about it. It's that strange. Imagine you're the first person to hear something like that, or you're
1,000 lions roar, did you
some
say?
Native American who's traveling through the region that's never been in there before, and you hear this roar coming out of the mountains.
Wow.
I thought that was appropriately strange.
All right, well, is it time for our questions?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to follow up a bit on a quirky name, the Vegetable Man. Bill, I'm going to say that you're a comic book writer and an artist. That's your job. That's what you do right now. And your boss comes to you and you're challenged to create a new comic book strip, a hero or a villain, doesn't make a difference, whatever you want, but it has to be made out of a vegetable. Or I'll even give you a fruit.
Weird with this.
Vegetable or fruit. I'll wait till you get to my answer to my own question here. Vegetable or fruit. What would that be and how would that play out?
I'm a deer in the headlights at the moment.
Well, you want me to answer my part of the question and you think?
Yeah, give me a minute. Yeah,
Because I went crazy with this.
Well, you're an artist.
Okay. So for me, to answer my own question, I would go out with this comical habanero pepper character. Oh, it gets better. I would kind of sort of reinvent that old cartoon character that's since fallen out of the grace and favor, known as Speedy Gonzales, the fastest mouse in all of Mexico.
Hang on, before you get too far. It's only like the people that are the extremes that think that's a bad thing. Mexican culture loved Speedy Gonzales.
I love Speedy Gonzales.
They really liked him. It's only the people who aren't Mexican that are offended.
Yes, I know it's the weirdest thing, but that's, more politics we're not going to get into. But that style, that costume, a big sombrero hat, maybe even an eye patch or a poncho like Clint Eastwood would wear. Then I would give him the superpowers, of course, involving super red hot saliva or his touch.
Ugh.
I would have him like chew tobacco and spit, like in these old Western spittoons. But this habanero saliva would be like acid and it'd start melting them, kind of as a comic relief kind of thing. It would steam kind of as he spits out. But then he would chase down villains and he would like play with them. He might just touch their food or soak his finger in their drink while they were not aware. And then they would eat or drink and feel the wrath of this hellacious habanero who would then make you sweat out your wrongdoings to finally confess your sins, hoping for a cool drink of redemption. I told you I went weird.
Wow. You are an artist. But you've given me a moment.
All right. I was hoping.
I may be playing fast and loose, but vegetation will say that.
Okay. All right.
It's definitely a villain.
Oh.
We'll say you can call it kudzu if you want.
Oh, the kudzu vine.
Like almost the body snatchers kind of thing. Like they get into you and they like creep in under your skin or whatever. And so like it absorbs people into like a hive mind consciousness.
Oh.
And then now they have to be connected. Like the vine has to be connected. If you sever the vine, then the person, probably dies. I mean, it's a villain, right? So that's the thing. Like you want to save the people, but you can't.
So they have to stay close to the villain.
But it becomes like an extension of the original vine, and then they go out and they act, and little tendrils can come off and absorb.
I like it.
So that you create this hive mind monstrosity.
Just keeps growing and growing and growing.
So definitely a villain.
I like it.
Could be some kind of alien or something.
Well, it's not a vegetable or fruit, but to your son's point of us throwing in too much D&D, I don't want to disappoint. So I created, this is a total 100% mine, a thing called a vampire rose and my campaign for D&D.
You, sir, whether you know it or not, are a liar.
Am I?
Palace of the Silver Princess. Have you heard of that adventure?
Never.
It's a published adventure. It has a vampire rose garden.
Really?
And they've got a thorn on them and they're white.
Yes.
And then they latch on.
And the petals turn red.
And the petals turn red.
Oh my gosh. I never read that, I swear.
It's yeah. No,
maybe
it's in there.
subliminally I came across
Maybe you picked it up somewhere, but yeah.
But yeah, I adapted that into our D&D campaigns.
No, it's a cool idea.
And when you were talking about the kudzu vines, I've had like giant brambles and the characters kind of, the more you wrestle, it's kind of like quicksand and it just keeps, tangling you up.
Yeah, I don't think it acts quite like that, but yeah, it's in that adventure.
Well, still, I got my D&D plug in, so it's all good.
You talked about D&D.
It's all good.
So, with such a strange and outlandish story about a strange and outlandish creature,
Veggie Man,
while keeping confidences, I don't want you to violate anyone's trust. What is the strangest story of a creature you've ever been told?
That I've ever been told?
Yeah.
Okay. This actually takes place in Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks, up around the dam. A guy I used to work with, side by side. This was way before management. I mean, we worked down on the floor together. Avid hunter fisherman. I mean, like this guy after work would go fishing on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the kind of guy this
You say that like it's a weird thing, but
well, I mean,
why would that be weird?
I grew up.
If that's what he's into.
You go out on the weekends. But I mean,
this
guy didn't
you go
stop on the
fishing
weekends. He went through the week, any moment of the day. But yeah, okay. Said he was up at the dam and he was doing some catfishing late at night, and him and a couple buddies, and he did say we had a couple beers, but they fished up a catfish body that had squid tentacles as a head. I guess
weird
cactopus squid thing.
It almost sounds like a cuttlefish.
It was,
But that, I mean, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
envisioning that kind of thing.
and then, well, somebody that was there with us that overheard him telling me the story said, well, maybe this catfish had swallowed something, and these tentacles was something trying to get back out, maybe a snake, and you just thought it was tentacles, or I know, but it was believable enough with uncertainty that it was like, okay, I don't necessarily believe in a hybrid catfish squid, but maybe in the dark while you're fishing under some intoxication of some beer, you fish something up and it spooked you, and that's, the silhouette that you saw or whatever. But that, I spent way too much time thinking about that after
Yeah.
he told me that story. It's like, what could that have been? And we continued to talk about that on the shop floor for seriously probably a week straight. And he's like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have taken a picture. He goes, I swear, just on anything you want me to. I've fished up to that area. I've swam those waters. But he goes, I've never come across anything like that since. But he goes, I swear. Now, believably, he said, this wasn't like a 4 foot or something. He goes, it was like a 12, 14-inch catfish. So it's like, that was weird.
Weird.
That's what pops into my mind. How about you?
Well, I was thinking, I had a friend, I've talked about him on the podcast before. We ran around a lot, and we talked about a lot of weird things, and he was an avid pursuer of the strange and unusual. And so we used to, I don't know, we called it spook hunting, but it was just hop in the car and drive around old back roads and look for places that were abandoned or the like. And I remember being with him, and I think maybe my girlfriend was with us and a couple other friends. And we're driving down the road, and we're driving down this stretch of road, and this, I want to say, was out towards the Devil's Elbow area, which has quite a reputation.
Oh,
anyway.
yeah, definitely.
But I remember being on some back roads, some gravel roads, some country roads, and he starts telling us this story about how he gets really nervous on this road. And we're like, okay, well, this guy's always got interesting stories. So we're like, okay, what's going on, man? Tell us more. And he starts telling us about, there was one time he was out there, he was with his girlfriend, and maybe they had a couple friends with him, year or so before, whatever. But he says they had stopped for some reason. Maybe they thought they saw something, or they were just goofing around or whatever. But that one of his friends started to panic, and he goes, man, there's something out there. And he's like, oh, whatever, dude. And he goes, no, I swear there's something out there, man. I heard something. And they were in the car, and so they're listening. And he says these 2 great big green eyes peeked at him out of the forest. Now, mind you, they would not have had the lights aimed at the wood, so it's not eye shine. Whatever it is, It's self-illuminating.
Glowing.
So he says these 2 green eyes, and he goes, and they're big. He goes, we're sitting in the car. Whatever it is, they would have been bigger than the car. If it was a 4-legged animal, it's a big animal. If it's a 2-legged animal,
Now, hold on. Bigger than the car? You mean like the headlights of the car or
like
the car?
The height of the eyes is over the top of the car. Not that the eyes were big.
Okay,
big, but the creature that they would have been a part of was big.
Okay.
And so, like any good spooked teenagers on a roundabout road,
You go check that out.
well, no, they roll up the windows, lay on the gas, and take off just as fast as they can. Whatever it is,
Call yourself spook hunters.
whatever it is, paces them. No matter how fast he gets the needle on the accelerator, or the speedometer, it is right there and keeps pace with them all the way down to the end of the road where it does like a T junction, and then there's like a fence line or whatever. It until he flies through that intersection.
Wow.
So whatever it was big, and it was fast, and it moved through the woods pretty dang quick. And I mean, out of all the things, I don't think I've told that story before. There were a few that I thought of immediately.
I've never heard you tell that story.
There were a few I thought of immediately that I was like, I'm almost certain I've covered them before. But that one was one that was, somebody had told me that, and it was just weird. Same guy also had a huge fear of spiders and said he remembered having to get underneath the barn or something one time to do some work on his dad's property, and a spider the size of a dinner plate came at him. So the guy had a lot of weird stories. And a lot of the stories that I've told when I say they came from a friend, to be fair, a good 50% are him or someone he knew. So he had a lot of weird stories. So again, he was a fun person to hang out with, very, very interested in the same sort of topics.
Those people molded us into essentially making this podcast and doing what we do today. So,
well, I mean, if it wasn't for his stories, I wouldn't have half my stories.
kudos.
And a lot of the things we saw running around, I mean, I know I've told a lot of the stories that I heard from him on this podcast because they're just interesting stories, whether they were factual accounts or exaggerated or whatever. This guy had a lot of weird stuff. And I was there for some weird stuff. So I tell this story about my stepbrother, who we went to Walmart together, and he was telling my girlfriend later on about something that had happened to us. And I was going to call him a liar, but I realized everything he was saying happened. It was just the way he told the
The way he
story.
portrayed it.
So, I mean,
That's a good storytelling.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that you've enjoyed our elaborated version of the Vegetable Man of West Virginia. Definitely an interesting story. We, I think by popular degree, agree that it should be the vampire vegetable.
it seems like a much better
That's
name.
a much better name in today. So, we're going to, for what that's worth, we'll put that out there. But we appreciate you putting up with two old D&D nerds and sharing of the podcast, and we appreciate your time.
Before we step away, I will say last weekend I got to go to the Alton Museum of Oddities
Oh, yeah.
in Alton, Illinois. It's just the other side of the river from St. Louis, about 20 miles outside of St. Louis. I recommend it if you're in the area. It's definitely worth taking a look at. I bought a book there about Haunted Alton, and I think we're going to do an episode in the future about Alton once I get to
They
do
got
a
a
little
lot of
reading.
creepy stuff up that way.
Apparently the place is just crawling with ghosts.
A lot of haunted.
It is regarded,
hotels and inns.
the thing that I read, it is regarded as one of the most haunted small towns in the country. And the museum, there's like a really cool crystal mysticism shop that's in the same little building, which unfortunately we had missed being able to go by one day. It had closed for the
Aw.
week for some reason. And so we didn't get to see it. We missed it when we first drove by. There's like one little sign on the corner of a building. I guess it used to be a hotel, but we missed it the first time driving by. We followed the directions to the letter that the Siri gave us and drove right by it. And I'm like, it's supposed to be here. And then finally my kid's like, hey, there's the sign. So we pulled in real quick to look at it. They have a creature, the Piazza bird, something like that's been seen there. All kinds of ghosts. Now I was telling Eric, there was a bit of wreckage from the Roswell incident. There was a Flavor Aid packet from Jonestown. There was Jeffrey Dahmer's glasses, dirt from John Wayne Gacy's
stuff.
crawl space. It's a one-room museum. It's $5 to get in. I mean, you're not out a whole lot of money. If you skip your Starbucks in the morning, you can pay for two people to go. But a lot of books, and I don't remember the guy's podcast, but the guy who runs it has his own podcast, and he publishes a lot of books. If you go in, like, all of his books are there for sale. I bought the revised edition of Haunted Alton to read. You get free sticker. And I got a little ghost sticker for the Oddities Museum. It's really neat. So I would recommend, if you're in the area, if you're in St. Louis, again, if you're already in the area, it's 20 minutes and I think we spent an hour almost, and it's just a one-room deal, but there's just so many little things to look at and read about, and
Sounds
it's a
interesting.
really neat place.
Also, before we close, I want to bring out a couple things. I think we have plugged it before, but I just want to throw it out there again. Bill has been uploading all of our episodes on YouTube. So for those of you who might want another alternative source, or if you know someone that has expressed interest and maybe for whatever reason they don't like to or don't have the access to the podcast there, you can find us on YouTube. I think at this point he's got almost up to date. Every episode is posted there.
I was a week behind, but I got all caught up. Every episode that we've ever released on the podcast through the podcast apps is out there. So
Very cool. And thank you, Bill, for doing that extra work. Also, one little tidbit, I was reached out to this week by the Lebanon Daily Record newspaper, and apparently, by the time this airs, this will probably all have occurred. We are going to be interviewed by our local little newspaper for doing our podcast. So we were really excited about that. Hopefully spread the news a little bit. But we certainly appreciate all of you out there, especially the ones who've listened from episode 1, because let's face it, some of those are even harder to listen to than
They're
today's episodes. They're a little rough, but
but they're shorter, so
They
you
are
don't have
much
to
shorter.
sit through much.
we certainly appreciate each and every one of you, and we would not be able to do this without you guys. I can't say what I want to say.
Well, to be fair, we could do it without their support,
Yeah.
but what would be the point? I think the reason we continue to do it is we know there's at least 60, 70, 80 people out there that want to hear what we have to say.
And we have noticed some growth lately.
We
very pleased
we
with
are
that.
still growing ones and twosies. So, and the YouTube channel is getting responses, and we're getting some information. We gained a lot of followers because of Owen Benjamin. The Owen Benjamin episode got a lot of attention. And the Sinister Stories of Wrestling, I think, is what we called it. That one got a lot of attention, too.
And it's fun for us to kind of do these because these are all topics of various points of interest for us, but then to kind of sit back and see what our listeners find the best of what we might have considered, out of our best list is not always matching up. But anyway, we certainly appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for listening.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this. Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us. If you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us, reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
I think we can get to 45 minutes.
Well, I doubled what I had in probably an hour last night, and doubling
I had an hour and a half.
Wasn't a lot.
I had an hour and a half, or a page and a half when I went to bed. I had almost 4 pages by the time I was done. So 4 to 5 pages is usually what I come
I
in
literally thought, Bill, what have you done to me again?
I thought it was going to be like the Gower. I was just waiting for you to text me.
No,
Be like,
I knew
"Dude,
you
this
were
isn't
waiting,
gonna work."
and I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to come up with something on this.
Well, every now and then.
It's like you with me in my Facebook post. It's like, yeah, he's just wanting this. He's wanting this.
Well-
I'm not going to give him a satisfaction.
What was the one that you did? The visitor, the Van Meter visitor.
Oh yeah, that was a short and sweet one.
I was I was on the verge of going, dude, what is this?
We're both
And then,
guilty.
of course, I do the Vegetable Man, and it's like one sighting.
And it's like, when you told me the Vegetable Man, I'm like, what? The Vegetable Man? It's like, that's not even a scary title. It's
No.
like, okay. But here we go.
Now, Barker himself would describe Jennings as an amateur rocket.
I thought you were saying rocker.
Yeah. Now, if you're interested, and there's still time, usually we cover these things and we're past. Veggie Man Day is coming up.
That's my headline.
Oh, shit. Well, then never mind. What else do I got? Well, I don't know. From February 24th. From February... slow down.
February's a hard word.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.